Section 4.2 talks about factoring trinomials that are written in the form x squared plus bx plus c. Before we start doing factoring of those types of trinomials, I'd like to remind you of one thing that you worked on when you were in Math 3, and that is something with the distributive property. It was really the double distributive property. When you had something written like this, and you had to use the double distributive property to give another name for this, we didn't really call it the double distributive property. If you remember, it was called FOIL. And in order to go through and multiply this out, we FOILed it. And FOILing it meant that we multiplied the first two terms, x and x, by themselves and got x squared. Then we multiplied the outer two terms together, in this case plus 4x. Then the inner two terms, 3 times x, and got plus 3x. And finally, we did the last two terms, 3 times 4, and we got 12. When we got done with that, we just made sure to combine anything that could be combined. So we could combine the 4x plus the 3x, and we would have a final answer of x squared plus 7x plus 12. So back in Math 3, you were going from this, using the double distributive property or FOIL, and you were getting an answer like x squared plus 7x plus 12. And notice that this is written in that form, x squared plus bx plus c. What we're going to do in Section 4.2, and also in Section 4.3 for that matter, is we are going to do the reverse of this. We are going to start with something like x squared plus 7x plus 12, and we are going to factor it this time and end up with something like the x plus 3 times x plus 4 inside the set of parentheses. Here's the first example. X squared plus 9x plus 8. It's a trinomial, and what we are going to do is we are going to think about factoring it using the reverse of FOIL. So that means that I am going to be starting with two different sets of parentheses, because I know when I FOIL these things, I have to end up with x squared plus 9x plus 8. Well, first of all, because this is x squared, I know that when I multiply the first term times the first term of the other factor, I need to get x squared, which means that both of these need to be an x. Second of all, and this is very important, I'm taking a look and I'm noticing that this is an addition sign. In order for that to be an addition sign, one of two things has to be true about the operation signs inside the set of parentheses. I'm going to put circles there right now. Either they both have to be positive, because a positive times a positive, whatever these numbers are, would give me a positive 8, or they could possibly both be negatives. If they were both negatives, a negative times a negative, when I multiply them, will also give me a positive 8 answer. I know that both of these have to be positive numbers, because I have to end up with a positive 9x. So now what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to think of two numbers I can multiply together to get 8, because I'm going to need those two numbers right here and right here. So I'm thinking about the numbers I can multiply together to get 8. I could multiply 1 times 8 to give me 8, or I could multiply 2 times 4 to give me 8. But I also know that when I FOIL it, I have to end up with 9 for that middle term. So I'm taking a look at these two numbers, and I know when I add or subtract these two numbers, I have to end up with 9. So 1 plus 8 would give me 9. 2 plus 4 gives me 6. So it's not going to be the 2 and the 4. It's going to be the 1 and the 8. Let me rewrite again what I have down here, just because I have so much writing down here. We started, as I said, with an x and an x. We know that it's going to be an addition and an addition. So I know it's going to be a 1 and an 8. I need to go through and I need to check and make sure. I actually need to FOIL this and make sure this does work. So now I'm just going to go through and do the foiling. First of all, I'm going to take x times x. X times x is x squared. Then I'm going to do the outer. X times 8 is plus 8x. Then I'm going to do the inner. 1 times x is plus 1x. Then I'm going to do the last. 1 times 8 gives me 8. If I go through and combine my like terms, I do get x squared plus 9x plus 8 for an answer. Let me go through and do one more of the same type. Notice that in both of these cases, again, I have an addition sign and an addition sign. If I go through and set up my parentheses, I know it's going to be x and x because x times x is going to give me x squared. I know because this is an addition sign, both of these signs have to be the same, both of the signs that are inside the set of parentheses. I'm not sure what they are necessarily yet, but I know they both have to be the same. Because this is an addition sign, I know that they're also both going to have to be addition signs. So I'm going to put addition signs in there. Now I just need to know what these two numbers are. I know that when I multiply them, because of FOIL, I have to get 20 for an answer. So the factors of 20, I could multiply 1 times 20. I could multiply 2 times 10. I could multiply 4 times 5. And I'm looking for the pair of factors that when I add them or subtract them, I'm going to end up with 12 for an answer. Well, it would have to be the 2 and the 10 because 2 plus 10 gives me 12. So one of these is going to be 2, the other one is going to be 10, and now I have this factored. I'll leave it to you to go through and check it by FOIL. Here's another one that's just a little bit different. X squared minus 11x plus 18. I'm going to go through and put down my two sets of parentheses. Once again, I know it has to be an x and an x because those give me my x squared. And now I'm taking a look at these operation signs again. This is a plus 18. So once again, these two signs that are in here have to be exactly the same. But now this is a subtraction sign. Well, there's no way I can add two numbers together and get a negative number. So that tells me that this is a subtraction and this is a subtraction because that's the only way I can get a subtraction when I add two numbers together that are going to be the same. So now I'm trying to figure out, well, what are the two numbers that I'm going to multiply to get 18? So once again, I'm going to start to write down the factors of 18. 1 times 18, 2 times 9, 3 times 6 are the factors of 18. And I'm looking for a set of those that are going to give me an 11. And this time it would be a negative 11, but an 11 when I add and subtract. And once again, it's going to be the middle pair here, 2 and 9, because 2 plus 9 gives me 11. So I would have x minus 2, x minus 9. That would be the factors of it, x minus 2 times x minus 9. And once again, I'll let you go through and check that by FOIL. Up to this point, we've always had an addition sign in front of that last number, but here you can see that I have a subtraction sign this time in front of that last number. Having a subtraction sign in front of that last number is going to change something slightly. First of all, I am going to go through and set up my two different sets of parentheses. I know it's going to be x times x because x times x is going to give me the x squared. But now, because this is a subtraction sign, when I go through and I multiply this number times this number, whatever it is, the only way to get a negative 15 is if one of the signs is positive and one of the signs is negative. So now I'm going to make one of these x plus, the other one x subtract. But now I still need to figure out what are these last numbers. Well, I'm taking a look here at the 15, and I'm thinking about the factors of 15. It's either 1 times 15 or 3 times 5. And now, once again, I'm thinking about, well, I have to get a 2. Remember I mentioned that you would either add or subtract these two different sets of factors in order to get that middle number. Well, the 1 and the 15, adding them, I get 16. Subtracting them, I get 14. With the 5 and the 3, if I add them together, I get 8. But if I subtract them, I do get 2, which is what I need right here. So now I just need to go through and decide, well, where does the 5 go and where does the 3 go? I need a positive 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the bigger number 5 with the positive sign and the smaller number 3 with the negative sign. So factored I have, I'm going to rewrite it, x plus 5 times x minus 3. It's really important that you realize that because this is a positive 2, I put the bigger number with the positive symbol, with the addition sign. Now I am going to go through and I'm going to check this just by foiling it. X times x gives me x squared. That's the first. Then the outer, I get minus 3x. The inner, I get plus 5x. And the last, I get minus 15. If I go through and combine my like terms, I do get x squared plus 2x minus 15, which was what I started with. Here's another example where I have a subtraction sign in front of that last number. So when I go through and set up my sets of parentheses, once again it's going to be an x and an x. Because this is a subtraction sign right here, I know one of these has to be add, the other one has to be subtract. As I go through and do this now, I'm once again thinking, what numbers can I multiply together to get 6? So the numbers I can multiply together to get 6 are 6 times 1, 3 times 2. And this time I need to get a negative 5 as I go through. Well, this is an interesting one because as I go through, I can subtract 6 minus 1, and that would give me 5. I could add 3 plus 2, and that would give me 5. So this is one in which, looking at it that particular way, I really don't know, perhaps, which one. So I need to go through this time, and I just need to try different ones. If I try, let's say, the 3 and the 2. Let me just try the 3 and the 2 here. Because this is a subtraction sign, I would put the bigger number with the subtraction sign this time. So if I put the 3 here and the 2 here, now I want to go through and check this by foiling. If I check it by foiling, I get x times x is x squared. Then the outer, minus 3x. Then the inner, plus 2x, minus 6. If I go through and combine these, I get x squared minus x minus 6, which is not what I wanted because I needed a 5 up here. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to redo this again. Sometimes you just have to do this by trial and error. I knew it was x plus. I knew it was x minus. Now I'm going to try the 6 and the 1. Once again, as I go through and do this, I know that I want to get a negative 5 here. So I'm going to take the bigger number, 6, and I'm going to put it with the subtraction. I'm going to put the 1 with the x plus. And now I'm going to check it by foiling. When I check it by foiling, I get x squared minus 6x plus 1x minus 6. And then when I go through and combine the minus 6x plus 1x, my final answer is x squared minus 5x minus 6, which is what I started with. So this is the correct factored form. Sometimes you just have to go through trial and error and try a couple of different things. You may or may not have noticed, but up to this particular point, with all the trinomials I've given you, there has never been a number in front of the x squared. In this particular case, I do have a number in front of the x squared. And although there are several ways to factor this, if it's possible, the very first thing I would do is I would factor that out of all the terms if possible. And in this case it is. 3 is a common factor of 3, 21, and 18. So in order to do this, the very first thing I would do is I would factor out just that 3. If I did that, I would be left with x squared subtract 7x plus 6 inside a set of parentheses. And now, what I have inside the set of parentheses is just a trinomial that we've been working with all along. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to factor that out. And once again, I'm going to have an x and an x because x times x is going to give me x squared. Because this is an addition sign, both of the signs here and here have to be the same. And because that is a subtraction sign, that means both of these are going to be subtraction. So I have x minus and x minus. And then I just need to figure out what my two numbers are. Well, in order to get 6, I can have 1 times 6, or I can have 2 times 3. But I know I need to end up with this 7. So it's going to have to be the 1 and the 6. And since both of these are subtraction, it doesn't matter which one goes where. So I have x minus 1 times x minus 6 inside the set of parentheses. Just don't forget that you also have the 3. So the final answer here is 3 times x minus 1 times x minus 6. Here is one final example. Even though this one does not look like it is a trinomial written in the form ax squared plus bx plus c, it really is as soon as I realize I can go through and factor out something. I have a common 2, factor of 2 in all these terms. I also have a factor of x in all these terms. So I'm going to start this by factoring out a 2x out of each one of these terms. When I do that, I'm left with 2x times x squared minus 10x minus 24. And now what I have written is a trinomial just as we've been doing. I just have to remember that I also will need to include the 2x in my final answer. So I'm just going to go through and I'm going to factor out the x squared minus 10x minus 24. I know it's going to be an x and an x. Because this is a subtraction, one of these has to be a plus, one of these has to be a subtraction. And now I need to go through and figure out for 24, what are the factors? 1 times 24, 2 times 12, 3 times 8, 4 times 6. I know that I have to end up with a 10. Well, I can do it with the 2 and the 12, because 12 minus 2 gives me 10. I can also do it with the 6 and the 4. So I'm going to try one of them. I'm going to try, first of all, the 12 and the 2. I'm going to put the 12 with the subtraction because I know this is a subtraction right here. I'm going to put the larger number with the subtraction. I'm going to put the smaller number 2 with the addition. And now I'm going to check this and make sure that it works. So I have x times x, I'm foiling this now, x times x is x squared minus 12x plus 2x minus 24. And when I combine, I forgot to put the x in there, then when I combine, I am going to get my x squared minus 10x minus 24. So I know that my final answer in factored form is this 2x times x plus 2 times x minus 12. As with anything, the more problems you do here, the easier this will become. This is one skill that for sure you do need to have a lot of practice.